There's a kind of silence that isn't empty, it's heavy. It sits in the corners of your room like something physical, pressing against your chest when the lights go out and the rest of the world has moved on without you. It's the silence that drags you awake at 3 in the morning, eyes open, heart already racing, with a question you never invited. Why did they leave when everything seemed fine? You lie there tracing shadows on the ceiling, trying to reassemble a puzzle with missing pieces. The warmth of their hand was right there, their laughter still hung in the air, and then nothing. Just cold. Just the empty side of the bed stretching out like a wasteland. Here's what most people do: they take the last words at face value. They stare at the screen, reading and rereading those sterile little phrases. I don't care anymore. Or we just aren't right for each other. It's easier that way. It's easier to believe someone simply stopped loving you than to stare into the terrifying mess of why they're actually running. But Carl Jung, the man who spent his entire career charting the darkest corridors of the human mind, would tell you to stop. He'd look at your exhaustion, your desperate scramble for answers, and he'd say something you don't want to hear. You're looking in the wrong place entirely. Jung understood something most of us spend our whole lives missing. The conscious mind is a liar, not occasionally, professionally. It builds justifications, rewrites history, constructs entire false narratives, all to keep the ego safe, the pride intact, the unbearable truths buried where they can't do any damage. So when someone tells you they've moved on, when they look at you with that practiced indifference, that's just the script. That's the ego doing its job, the mask performing its role. But the unconscious doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your dignity or your excuses. It's brutal and it's honest. And when it's been locked away long enough, it starts kicking down doors. If your days have become a blur of contradictions, if this person has you spinning between hope and devastation on a 48-hour cycle, then congratulations. You're already watching the unconscious do its work. Think about how they treat you. One night they're holding you like they're drowning and you're the only thing keeping them above water. The intensity is almost frightening. You let your guard down because it feels real. How could something that raw be a lie? But 2 days later they're someone else entirely. Cold eyes, flat voice. They look through you like you're furniture. Then they vanish. Weeks pass. You're a ghost to them. And just when you've almost convinced yourself to stop caring, there they are, back in your notifications, your doorway, your head, acting like the silence never happened. It's maddening. It'll make you question your own sanity. Jung would tell you to put the phone down, stop dissecting their texts. Stop counting the hours between replies or analyzing whether that period at the end of the sentence means something. Those words are smoke. They're camouflage. Look at the behavior instead. When a person's words point one direction and their actions stagger in another, something much deeper is happening. Their soul is caught in an undertow they can't name. They're trying to tell you a truth so enormous, so fundamentally threatening to the life they've built, that they can't even admit it to themselves. They're not communicating through language anymore. They're communicating through chaos, through their fear, their unresolved wounds, their sheer terror at what you've stirred up inside them. Here's the thing nobody tells you about indifference. It's quiet, it's polite, it's boring. When someone genuinely doesn't care, they're consistent. They respond on time. They say reasonable things. They move on cleanly. But that's not what you're dealing with, is it? What you're dealing with is someone who swings between desperate closeness and violent retreat. Someone who can't decide whether to pull you in or shove you out. And that kind of chaos doesn't come from apathy. It comes from a person at war with their own depths. Someone who feels too much and has no idea what to do with any of it. The person who left you standing in that silence isn't indifferent. They're haunted. Your presence cracked open something they've spent a lifetime sealing shut, and the quiet they've left behind isn't the absence of feeling. It's a dam. And behind it there's an ocean. To understand what's actually happening here, you need two of Jung's most important ideas, the persona and the shadow. The persona is the mask. It's the version of themselves they've been building since childhood, studying the room, learning what gets approval, figuring out which version of me keeps everything safe. Their persona says, I'm independent, I'm rational, I don't need anyone, my heart is a fortress. Watch them closely and you'll see it. They walk through life wrapped in competence like it's body armor. They speak with authority, they maintain distance. They keep everyone far enough away that nobody can spot the cracks in the foundation. They've confused emotional numbness with strength, and for a long time it worked. Then they met you. They expected another surface-level thing, another connection they could control and cut whenever it suited them. But something about you was different. Not in a way they could manage or rationalize, in a way that bypassed their defenses entirely. There was a familiarity in it, something that reached deeper than they were prepared for. Your presence, the way you looked at them, the vulnerability you offered without apology, started cracking that stone mask they'd spent decades building. For the first time in their life, the persona failed. They looked at you and felt something that threatened to swallow them whole, and it scared them half to death. This is what Jung called the leakage of the unconscious. When the conscious mind refuses to face a truth too large, too destabilizing, that truth doesn't vanish, it can't be willed away. It sinks into the dark water of the unconscious and it grows. When the pressure builds past what the ego can contain, it starts bleeding through behavior, through dreams, through the body itself, completely bypassing whatever story the person is telling themselves. You've seen it. Maybe you didn't know what to call it, but you've seen it. It's in the way they look at you when they think you're not watching. That split-second flash of longing tangled up with something close to panic. It shows up in the dreams they can't shake. The ones where they're searching for you, losing you, waking up shaken with no explanation. It leaks through the way they orbit your life from a distance, checking your social media at odd hours, asking mutual friends about you, driving past places they know you'll be, desperate for proximity but terrified of contact. They want the warmth, they're convinced it'll burn them alive. What you're watching is a defense mechanism as old as the species. What does a fragile ego do when it's hit by something enormous? It doesn't open up, it runs, it builds a wall, it fakes boredom, manufactures anger, performs detachment because pretending is the only survival strategy it has. That silence you're sitting in right now, it's not cruelty, it's not forgetting, it's a silent scream from someone whose internal world is falling apart. Every day they don't call, every time they stare through you with that dead expression. They're spending everything they have to hold the illusion together. They're not protecting themselves from you. They're trying to survive the emotional catastrophe your love detonated inside them. Now we go deeper. Jung wrote extensively about projection, the way we unconsciously transfer our inner landscape onto the people around us. When someone pulls you into a breathless embrace one day and shoves you away the next, they're not reacting to you. Not really. In those moments they don't even see you clearly. You've become a mirror, and what's staring back at them is their own shadow. The shadow holds everything a person has rejected about themselves, the unmet needs, the childhood wounds that never closed, the terror of real intimacy. When they look at you, they don't just see someone they love, they see the ghost of every person who ever left them. They see the price tag on vulnerability. Jung understood this clearly. When love becomes a mirror, not everyone can bear to look. They pull back because the reflection is too honest. It forces them into contact with pain they've buried for years, pain they were certain they'd outgrown. Your love didn't just bring those wounds back to the surface. It proved they were never healed in the first place. Their withdrawal doesn't mean they've forgotten the feel of your hand or the sound of your voice. It means they're drowning in a fight they can't win. Picture what their days actually look like from the inside. Two forces pulling in opposite directions. One voice, quiet, deep, coming from the part of them that still knows the truth, whispers, "Go back, tell them how you feel, admit that you're afraid." But before it can finish, another voice, loud, aggressive, forged in whatever first taught them that love is dangerous, shouts it down. "Stay quiet, stay behind the wall, don't you dare get hurt again." They give you contradictory signals because they are, in the most literal psychological sense, divided against themselves. A person who hasn't done the work of becoming whole will always create fractured relationships. They can't offer you consistency when their own inner world is a war zone of mismatched pieces. And here's where Jung's thinking takes its cruelest turn. A truth most people miss when they're buried in grief. Your absence carries more weight than your presence ever did. When you were there, available, patient, waiting, their ego had a full arsenal of tricks, daily routines, the noise of work, shallow socializing, a running stream of self-deception. They could look at you and tell themselves, "I could walk away any time. I'm not attached." Your availability made it easy to lie. But the moment you actually leave, the moment the gap becomes real, the whole structure collapses. The distractions stop working, the walls crack. That's when the conscious mind loses its grip and the unconscious takes over completely. In the silence of their own company, your memory doesn't return neatly. It ambushes them, in the cereal aisle, in the middle of a sentence. When a song comes on that they didn't even know was yours, it comes back as a word you used to say, the way you laughed, a sudden fist of regret that hits them in the sternum like something physical. The unconscious doesn't care about pride. It doesn't respect timelines. It has one question, and it will ask it forever. What remains unresolved? What remains unresolved isn't just love, it's cowardice. Their cowardice in the face of what love actually demands. Because real love isn't comfortable. It's a reckoning. It requires you to shed old masks, tolerate real vulnerability, and stand before another person with nothing between you and them. For a wounded soul, losing you, painful as it is, still feels less dangerous than exposing the emptiness they've been hiding from themselves, so they ran. But watch, they can't actually leave your orbit. Like a satellite with a broken engine, they circle you. They retreat into isolation, then drift toward the edge of your life, catch a glimpse of you standing on your own 2 feet and bolt again. Stuck in a loop they built themselves, unable to step into your warmth, unable to survive their own cold. So what do you do with all of this? What does it actually mean for how you live your life? The answer is simple to say and brutal to execute. Stop chasing the illusion. Stop waiting at the perimeter of their battlefield, hoping they'll finally put the weapons down and become the person you need. Don't beg for clarity from someone who's chosen the safety of their own chaos. Every time you reach into that silence, every text, every call, every plea for an explanation, you're shrinking yourself to fit the dimensions of their fear. You're making yourself smaller so they don't have to grow up. Called the highest purpose of human life individuation, the long, often painful process of becoming a whole, integrated self. This relationship didn't show up to break you. It didn't exist so you could spend your years trying to rescue someone who's refusing the rope. It came to wake you up, to show you where your boundaries were soft, where your fear of loneliness was letting you survive on scraps. Their hot and cold routine says nothing about your worth. Their inability to love you with any kind of consistency doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means with full psychological certainty that they don't yet have the internal architecture to face the truth of who they are. Pay attention to the patterns underneath the words. Your gut recognized the instability long before your hope was ready to admit it. You felt the temperature drop before they ever walked out the door. Don't try to force a confession from a mouth that's wired shut with fear. Take the truth as it stands, not as you wish it were. Hold on to this, because it matters. You changed them. You got through. Past the walls, past the persona, past every defense they'd spent a lifetime building. You reached the deepest, most protected part of them, and they will never look in a mirror again without seeing some trace of who they were when they were with you. But that fight is theirs now. You can't slay someone else's demons, especially when they're using those demons as a barricade against you. Stand in what you understand. Let their silence keep telling its story in the dark. Give yourself permission to turn away from the mirror and walk your own road, because sometimes the deepest liberation isn't a tearful apology. It isn't the dramatic reunion at the airport. It's simply this: understanding the rules of the game they were playing, offering a quiet, sad smile to the past and stepping out of it entirely. The silence that follows that choice is a different animal. It's not the frantic, chest-tight silence of the small hours. It's the hush that comes after a storm breaks, wide and open, full of something that might be peace. When you stop insisting they be different than they are, you stop the hemorrhaging inside your own mind. You begin to see that their retreat was never evidence of what you lacked. It was a map of their limits. They could only go as far as their own healing allowed, and that turned out to be a shallow shore next to the ocean you carried them to. It's heavy. Accepting it is heavy, but there's an enormous grounding calm on the other side. For a long time you probably thought that if you just held on harder, if you found the right words, demonstrated enough patience, you could close that fracture inside them. You believed your love could bridge their void, but Jungian psychology insists on a hard truth. No one can carry another person's shadow. Try and you'll drown in darkness that was never yours to begin with. By stepping back, by refusing to keep dancing their approach and retreat waltz, you're not abandoning them. You're handing their journey back. You're granting them the dignity of their own reckoning, even if that means they have to sit alone inside the walls they built. Think about the energy you've spent trying to decode their absence, every hour picking apart text messages, every sleepless night trying to predict which version of them would show up next. All of it was life draining out of you, energy stolen from your own becoming. The moment you pull that energy back into your own chest, everything shifts. You start to feel the texture of your own days again. You remember what your voice sounds like when it isn't begging for reassurance that will never arrive. Brick by brick, you start rebuilding. And the ground you're building on doesn't shake every time someone else gets scared. They'll stay on their loop, circling your memory like that broken satellite. They'll look back at the moments you shared with a cocktail of longing and justification that never quite settles. But you don't need to be there to watch. You don't need to stand vigil for the day their mask finally shatters. Your life is happening now, in present tense, far from the shadows of their unfinished past. You crossed the threshold. You looked at the wounds, you understood the machinery. The path ahead is clear. That silence that once felt like a prison, it's becoming a sanctuary. When the compulsion to fix them finally leaves your body, a strange and unfamiliar stillness takes its place. You realize that the version of them you were chasing, the tender, unguarded, fully present soul you caught in rare, fleeting moments, was real. But it was a fragment, a beautiful promise their ego couldn't afford to keep. You can't build a life on a promise that lives only in the unconscious. Think about how much of your own life you set on fire to keep them warm. You explained away the coldness, you rationalized the disappearances, you rewrote cruelty as tragedy, and yes, they are tragic. They're trapped in a loop of their own unprocessed history, but your survival can't be collateral damage in their war. Jung wrote at length about the wounded healer, and he always came back to the same point. You cannot heal someone else while you're bleeding out yourself. By refusing to keep absorbing the shock of their fear, by walking away from their erratic rhythm, you're forcing them to face the one thing they've been sprinting from: themselves. The fragments of their memory will still visit you. There'll be afternoons when the weight of their absence lands without warning, when the pull to reach out and drag them back feels almost physical. That's not a sign you were wrong to leave. It's the ghost of the projection working its way out of your system. The mind doesn't clear its illusions overnight. Let those moments come. Let them wash through you like cold rain and let them pass. Don't mistake the familiarity of the pain for proof that you need them. You're entering the most critical stretch of your own evolution now. The energy that their chaos consumed is pooling back in your hands, waiting. This is raw material. Every boundary you hold, every time you choose your own quiet over their noise, you're driving roots deeper into solid ground. You're stepping back into the lead of your own life instead of playing a supporting role in their tragedy. The road ahead doesn't promise you'll forget them. It promises something better, that their memory will lose the power to shake your foundations. There's a gravity, almost something sacred, in the moment you realize you no longer need their acknowledgement to feel whole. For months, maybe years, your equilibrium hung on their orbit. You were waiting for the text, the tone of voice, that rare flash of tenderness that would prove all the suffering had a point. You wanted them to look at you and say, "I see what I did, I'm sorry." But the further you go into the architecture of the human soul, the more you understand. Waiting for a wounded person to validate your pain is like asking someone with broken hands to catch you when you fall. Not because they don't want to, because they can't. When you stop waiting for them to write your closure, the strings snap one by one. You stop checking your phone with that low-grade dread that's been flavoring your days for longer than you'd like to admit. You stop rehearsing the speech, that long, impassioned monologue where you finally make them understand. And somewhere in the quiet a thought arrives that rearranges everything. They always understood. They understood your heart just fine. They were simply terrified of how much room it demanded. They didn't run because you were too complicated. They ran because you were too clear an echo of the truth they couldn't face. Let this settle over you the way an evening tide settles over sand. You're allowed to close the book yourself. You don't need their hand on the pen to write the last line. Jung spoke about the importance of containing your own psychic energy, creating a sealed vessel where the soul can do its work. Every time you look outward, wondering what they're thinking, whether they regret it, whether they're lying awake too, you crack that vessel open. You let the heat of your own transformation escape into the cold air of their absence. Pull it inward, all of it. When you do, the real work begins. You look at the parts of yourself that were desperate enough to survive on breadcrumbs, and instead of judging them, you hold them up to the light. You offer them the consistency that the outside world refused to provide. You become the stable ground you were so frantically searching for in someone else. And in that quiet act of self-containment, the ghost of their hold over you begins to dissolve, leaving behind not bitterness but something clean. As you settle deeper into that clarity, the space they left behind starts to change shape. It's not a wound anymore, it's a laboratory. When you look back at the trail of chaos, the freezing texts, the months of silence, the whiplash of being adored and discarded in the same week, you don't feel the knife edge of rejection anymore. You see a curriculum. Every agonizing twist was a necessary mirror, built not to destroy you but to crack open the version of you that had grown too small. If they'd been steady, if they'd offered you something comfortable and tepid, you might have stayed asleep. You might have kept shrinking your boundaries, playing a safe and diminished game in the shadow of someone else's limitations. It was their chaos, their violent swings between worship and abandonment, that forced you to question what you were standing on. They pushed you so far into the dark that you had no option but to strike your own light. In some twisted, paradoxical way, their failure to love you properly was the most transformative thing anyone ever gave you. It broke your dependence on the outside world. This is the hidden engine of what Jung called individuation, the conversion of raw suffering into self-knowledge. You begin to understand that you never lost them, because you never truly had them. You were in love with a potential, a projection of the healed version of them that only surfaced in the rarest, quietest moments. Mourning that illusion is natural. Chasing it any further is self-betrayal. Let the dead bury their dead. Let them sit inside their fortress, fighting the wars they chose. You have sunlight to walk into. The next time their memory knocks on your door, and it will, the unconscious doesn't settle its debts overnight. You won't answer it with panic. You won't answer it with longing. You'll greet it the way an old man watches a play he's seen before, with recognition, detachment, and maybe the faintest edge of a smile. You'll see their silence for what it always was, a monument to their fear, not a verdict on your worth. You'll exhale the last of their chaos, draw the circle of your own peace a little tighter, and know, with the bone-deep certainty that only comes from walking through the fire, that the person standing on this side of the storm is someone the person who entered it would barely recognize. You survived the mirror. The silence that remains isn't an empty room, it's a canvas. When you look out at the world now, the invisible threads that used to jerk you toward their horizon are gone. You're not scanning your phone for a specific name. You're not searching the faces in a crowd for someone who chose to become a stranger. That breathless, panicked hope has been replaced by something far more durable, a deep, immovable loyalty to your own peace. The journey through their labyrinth was never really about them. They were the catalyst, the accidental gatekeeper to rooms inside yourself that you'd locked and lost the key to. By forcing you into the agony of their absence, they accidentally pushed you back toward the parts of yourself you'd abandoned in the name of love. They made you stare into the dark, and in that dark you found your own spine. Let the weight of this land where it needs to. You don't need to check on them. You don't need to wonder whether they're happy, whether they're lonely, whether they've finally grasped the magnitude of what they threw away. That's their road. You've stepped off it. The greatest closure you will ever receive is this: you no longer need them to understand what happened in order for you to move forward. The story makes sense to you now. That's more than enough. The air ahead is lighter, the horizon is wider. The energy that was hemorrhaging into the maintenance of a broken thing is entirely yours to spend on your growth, your art, your future, the slow and luminous process of becoming exactly who you were supposed to be before you got lost in their storm. Offer a quiet nod of gratitude to the past for what it carved into you. Take one deep, clean breath and walk. You are at last free.